Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for what is, I think, maybe the most subtle and profound terrain of meditative practice. We're talking about the absolute final stretch.
Yeah, the rarefied atmosphere.
Exactly. We're navigating what happens after all the heavy lifting is, mostly done. Specifically within the lineage of S.N. Goenka, which is so precise, and drawing from his teachers, Yubakin and Leddi-Sayadaw.
That's right. Our listener has asked for really specific guidance here. They want to know about the trajectory from the Anāgāmī stage, the non-returner.
All the way to Arahant Phala, the final fruit.
The final fruit of cessation. And to do that, you're right, we have to look far beyond the standard 10-day course materials. We're really distilling teachings from Goenka's private Q&A sessions, his discourses for old students, and, the authoritative Burmese sources he himself relied on.
And the mission is really focused. You want the roadmap, you want the specific daily instructions, the techniques to maybe accelerate things, and most importantly, how do you verify this stuff? How do you check where you're at in these final, incredibly subtle stages?
Mm-hmm.
Because, let's be honest, Goenka-ji's public teachings were famously simple. He avoided all those complex poly charts and stage markers for a very good reason.
He did. He wanted people focused on the doing, not the achieving.
Right.
What's so fascinating here is that paradox, isn't it? Goenka-ji would consistently, publicly avoid giving these detailed roadmaps. He would just say, your job is to work here and now with the reality of anicca, impermanence. Don't run after stages.
Which is brilliance. It anchors you in what's actually happening.
It's a brilliant move to keep students grounded in the immediate, tangible reality of sensation.
If you follow this path long enough, and those deeper layers start to peel away, eventually you kind of need a map for the last 200 meters, right?
You do.
Especially when the phenomena get really weird and paradoxical, like when pressure builds but it doesn't release, or when the knower itself starts to feel wobbly.
Exactly. And while his public teaching was kept simple, the traditional Burmese lineage he inherited, the Sayadaw tradition, it contains these highly precise, very experiential instructions for people who have already gone through the first stages of purification.
So those instructions exist.
They do. And we're going to look at those explicit instructions that were given to advanced students. They specifically address the subtle transition we're talking about. The collapse of the dual frame, the final purifications of the mind stream, and, critically, the dissolution of what you might call the witness or the observer. This is how the Goenka lineage facilitates that final walk toward arahantship.
Okay, let's unpack this then. If Goenka-ji didn't explicitly hand out a checklist for this final stage, what were the, say, 4 central themes he taught that implicitly described the rest of the path? The things that target the structures Anāgāmī is still holding on to.
Right. So the emphasis, it stays practical. It's always about the functional purity of the mind, not just, conceptual mapping. The focus shifts entirely to the depth and the continuity of equanimity. So theme 1, complete purification of saṅkhāras through what's called sustained saukapeka. Goenka-ji was very, very clear that even after achieving the 3rd stage of enlightenment, purification is not done.
The job's not finished.
The job is not finished. The gross fetters are gone, sensuality, ill will, they're eradicated. But the really deep-rooted, subtle formations, they're still there. He noted the deepest saṅkhāras will still come up.
And what are these? What distinguishes these final saṅkhāras? Are they emotions like anger or sadness, or are they something else?
They're more structural, energetic, identity-based. They are these latent impurities, the sort of residual energies of the past, and they're often so subtle, they're woven into the very structure of the I am conceit.
So they don't even have a story attached to them.
Often not. They can manifest as just intense, non-emotional pressure, or profound physical resistance, or sometimes a deep, almost cosmic level anxiety that has no object. You can't even say what it's about.
That's a huge distinction. So it's not the old craving for pizza or being mad at your boss. It's the raw existential energy that fuels the construction of a self.
Precisely. And the instruction, which is the genius of the whole system, it remains unchanged. Meet them with perfect equanimity. No craving, no aversion. You have to realize that these deep layers are the last bits of fuel the mind needs to burn off.
And the equanimity at this level isn't just being patient.
No, it's an active non-interference. It's what allows the formation to just burn itself out completely. This is that stage of insight knowledge called saukrupakunya.
Equanimity toward formations.
Equanimity toward all formations. It's an irreversible neutrality that leads directly to the final purifications. You're basically observing the root of existence dissolving, and the instruction is, do not flinch.
So the high-level practice isn't about speeding things up. It's about sustaining perfect non-interference until the very root of the cell structure is just consumed. But wait, if the equanimity is perfect, what about the structure of knowing itself? This gets into that idea of the observer dissolving, which I have to say can sound a little terrifying.
It can. And that brings us right to theme 2, the dissolution of the observer, or what you could call witness consciousness. This is the absolute heart of the matter for arahantship. Goenka-ji, and this comes directly from his teacher, Uvak Bakin, deeply emphasized that eventually the sense of a fixed knower has to dissolve.
The watcher.
The watcher. He would sometimes say, at the depth of the mind, you see, there is no I who is observing, only observation is.
Okay, but hold on. Isn't that a bit risky? If the whole Goenka tradition avoided maps to stop people from striving, why are we now explicitly talking about dissolving the observer? Couldn't that lead to, dissociation or some kind of ungrounded state?
That's a really important question. The key distinction here is that this dissolution is the polar opposite of dissociation. Dissociation is the mind pulling away from something unpleasant, which actually reinforces the dual frame. I don't want to feel that.
Right.
Dissolution, on the other hand, is the complete realization of anicca impermanence applied to the observer itself. When that vantage point is finally seen to be just as ephemeral and conditioned as the sensations it's observing, it naturally collapses.
It's not a thing. It's a process.
Just another process.
Yeah.
And this is the cessation of the dual frame. The texts point to this as the direction of viññāṇa-nirodha, the cessation of consciousness as a fixed center. It's the highest form of seeing things as they really are, which is just bare, unlocated luminosity.
And without that fixed center, there is literally no one left to generate that subtle craving or aversion. So the roots of the remaining fetters, like conceit or restlessness, they just wither.
They have no ground to grow in. Exactly. And this purification leads the mind toward the ultimate goal of the path, which is cessation. And that's theme 3, entry into Nirodha Samapatti, cessation.
Which he never taught in the 10-day courses.
Never, because striving for a gap is completely antithetical to Vipassana. But he did acknowledge it privately, and it's grounded in the Ledi Sayadaw tradition. The progression is almost mathematical. Sustained, high equanimity leads to dissolution knowledge, which leads to the complete pacification of all formations.
So a mind that's purified itself so completely that it loses its ability to construct experience even for a moment, and it just falls into this pure, contentless cessation.
That's the precise description. When the mind becomes, as he said, so pure, so sharp, so subtle, it just naturally inclines towards cessation. It experiences the temporary, complete non-existence of mind and matter. That is the moment the chain of dependent origination breaks completely. And that experience is the irreversible confirmation that the deepest roots of suffering have been destroyed.
Okay, and the 4th theme, that has to be about what happens off the cushion to make sure all this stabilizes.
Yes. Theme 4, continuous natural awareness in daily life. Bakin had a great term for this. Kaya viveka, while in the world.
Kaya viveka.
It translates roughly as physical solitude or sequestration of the body. But the meaning is deeper. It's about profound physical non-interference and non-identification, even when you're fully engaged in the world.
So you're in the world, but not of it, in a very practical sense.
Very practical. The instruction is to live with awareness and equanimity in every single posture. And this is not effortful mechanical scanning. It's a continuous natural mindfulness that requires zero fabrication. This non-centered presence is what dissolves the last traces of the conceit I am that still linger even in Anāgāmī.
So let's just quickly summarize the tasks that remain for this final stretch for the person on this path.
Okay, so you're moving from Anāgāmī to Arahant. The 5 higher fetters are the target. The first 2, craving for form and formless existence, that's about letting go of attachment to even the most sublime meditative states by seeing their impermanence.
Even bliss has to be seen as anicca.
Even the highest bliss. Then there's mana, the subtle I am conceit. This isn't just a thought, it's the energetic structure that holds the idea of self, that gets destroyed by this profound equanimity and the fading of the observer.
And the final ones.
The deepest of all. Asmi-māna, the identity view on the level of pure energy, and avejja, ignorance. Asmi-māna is that subtle somatic anchor of the self, the felt location of the witness. Its dissolution through Nirodha Samapatti and the irreversible knowledge that follows that confirms the end of the path.
Given that really refined framework, we need the tactics. What were the actual instructions from Goenka and his lineage to help this collapse happen? Because this is the point where a longtime Vipassana practitioner has to fundamentally change how they approach the cushion.
That is the crucial hurdle. The practitioner has to shift away from that familiar, effortful scanning that got them this far. The key shift is structural. It's moving from doing to happening, from the witness to the dissolving of the witness. The whole focus becomes non-interference and centerlessness.
So what's instruction number 1?
Instruction 1 is to maintain that unwavering equanimity as these deeper saṅkhāras arise. And as we said, these can feel incredibly intense. Goenka-ji said they feel like they come from the depths of existence.
So if you get this intense pressure or heat or internal resistance,
the instruction is to simply observe calmly. Let them dissolve on their own time. Any intervention, even a subtle mental push or a wish for it to be over, that just reintroduces striving and strengthens the very observer you're trying to dissolve.
So the main job is to just hold the awareness steady. You're treating these powerful energies not as a problem to solve, but as a purification process to be witnessed with total neutrality.
Exactly. And that leads directly to instruction 2. Allow awareness to become effortless, panoramic, and non-manipulating. He would emphasize, do not interfere, do not make anything happen, just remain aware. Let Dhamma do its work.
So it's a shift from meditating on something, the breath, the sensation, to awareness itself just being the natural ambient state.
Yes. If you find yourself effortfully scanning the body, the instruction is to drop the effort. Just drop it.
Yeah.
And simply rest in awareness of the whole field.
And then taking that off the cushion.
That's instruction 3. Practice natural, choiceless awareness during daily life. That's the Kaya Viveka. U Ba Khin stressed this. The continuity of awareness is the secret of success.
So resting in that natural, effortless presence during everything.
Everything. If you are walking, you are aware of walking and the sound of the birds and the feeling of the air equally. If you are talking, you are aware of the communication and the feeling in your body equally. This continuity is vital because it dissolves the mana layer in every single posture. It breaks the habit of having a center-based identity.
Okay, but here's a practical question. If I'm supposed to be practicing natural, choiceless awareness all day, how do I stop myself from reverting back to effortful scanning the moment a strong sensation hits? Like a sudden pang of frustration. My instinct, honed over years, is to zoom in and observe it.
That is the core challenge of this transition, absolutely. When frustration arises, the practitioner who is used to scanning automatically introduces that zooming effort, which immediately reestablishes the observer center.
What's the advanced instruction?
The advanced instruction is to simply let the awareness widen, to include the frustration, the sound of the traffic outside, and the awareness of your whole body at the same time. The moment you narrow the field down to just the sensation of frustration, you've reinstated the doer. If the awareness is truly panoramic, the frustration just dissolves into the wider field without ever becoming my frustration.
That's a huge shift.
It's everything. And this all comes together in instruction 4. Understand anicca at the absolute deepest level until the frame of eye collapses. This is the intellectual and the experiential confirmation. For Goenka and U Ba Khin, realizing impermanence and the cessation of the ego sense, they're identical processes. When the impermanence of the observer itself is seen at the root, the fact that the knower is just another compound changing phenomenon, the ego dissolves structurally, not just as a philosophy.
So let's get really practical. What does the advanced daily schedule look like? The schedule that's designed to facilitate this shift, moving away from that structured vipassana.
The schedule is all about maximizing the opportunity for the mind to naturally incline toward dissolution. It's built on 2 long sits and that continuous awareness and activity.
Okay, so the morning.
The morning session is the foundation. Let's call it the 2 pillars session. It's about 60 to 90 minutes. You start by just settling into natural, centerless awareness for the first 10 minutes. No scanning, just letting the mind expand spherically. This is the first pillar. Quiet settling, letting the mind notice the subtle witness location, the pressure knots, whatever is in the background.
You're just preparing the ground.
Preparing the ground for the deepest purification. And the second pillar, that's the next 30 to 45 minutes of high-level saṅkhāra. This is crucial. It's not formal work, it's letting nature purify itself while you remain perfectly still and equanimous.
This is where you'd be observing those deep structural saṅkhāras, like a burning in the chest or that intense pressure in the head.
Exactly. And your job is to observe the impermanence of these powerful formations without any expectation of release. This phase is often where the deepest identity knots finally let go.
And the final part of that morning, Sid.
The final 20 to 30 minutes are critical for the structural shift. You allow awareness to shift into a panoramic, unfabricated mode. This is where pure awareness stabilizes. The witness becomes transparent, or it feels unstable. Thoughts slow down dramatically, and that subtle sense of I am meditating just disappears. This state directly supports viññāṇa-nirodha, the cessation mechanism, because the mind is finally resting outside of the dual frame.
So the morning sit is designed to burn the deep roots with equanimity and then condition the mind to rest without a center.
Precisely. And then all day long you reinforce this. Midday is all about awareness and activity. You maintain that natural, centerless awareness during all activities. Walk slowly, eat mindfully, work without just focusing on the task. This dissolves that remaining identity view, the māna layer, that clings to the idea that I am a person doing things.
And
In the evening, a soft equanimity session, 30 to 45 minutes. You sit comfortably, let awareness open wide, and observe any remaining tension without any pushing. It's an integration phase, letting the day's purification settle and deepen. The mind just rests in its own nature.
And finally, that extremely subtle instruction for the very end of the day, the one that directly targets the final collapse of the witness.
Yes. Before bed, letting go of the witness, just for 2 or 3 minutes. This is a profound, advanced instruction from Ubakin. As you lie down, you bring your attention lightly toward the witness location, that subtle sense of knowing from here, usually behind the eyes or in the center of the head.
And you notice that it is also a sensation.
It's also a sensation. It's not the ultimate observer. It's just another conditioned phenomenon of mind and matter. And then you just allow it to dissolve into the whole field. You let this awareness observe itself. This uses the natural relaxation before sleep to dramatically weaken the structural hold of the observer. You are effectively unclenching the nervous system's deepest anchor point.
Okay, let's pivot to this specific and often really perplexing problem that people in this final stage run into. You hear these reports of intense, strong pressure building in the head, the crown, the forehead, behind the eyes. It has clear arising and passing, but there's no release. The energy just builds in these relentless waves. Why does that happen? Why does the purification seem to stall right before the final breakthrough?
Here's where it gets really interesting. This experience, which can be just intensely frustrating, is actually a confirmation that you've entered the final corridor.
So it's a good sign.
It's a very good sign. The building, uncollapsing pressure is precisely what occurs during the final saṅkhāra unwinding phase that's targeting asmi-māna. It feels stuck, but it's a sign of immense progress because you are hitting the very foundation of identity.
So what are they? What are these knots or this pressure exactly?
We call them the pressure knots, and they're very distinct from earlier, more emotional blockages. They are the last identity-based saṅkhāras woven tightly into asmi-māna, that deepest I am conceit, and the viññāṇa's last anchoring points.
So they are the energetic patterns maintaining the fundamental belief that there's a self located in space.
Exactly. They often feel metallic or dense or like a tight crown of energy located precisely where we mentally situate the I that is watching.
So why the stasis? Why does it build and build without releasing?
It's not a lack of effort, it's a structural roadblock. These knots cannot dissolve through willpower or typical energetic release because they are being held in place by the observer's structure itself. They only dissolve when that dual frame, the last trace of observer-observed duality, weakens.
So the knot and the observer are two sides of the same coin. They're creating this energetic friction. The equanimity is high enough to bring the deepest knot to the surface.
But the observer, which is structurally dependent on the knot, is resisting its own collapse. Precisely. You are witnessing the boundary condition. The mind is highly equanimous, allowing these deep layers to surface, but the residual observer structure is still intact. This subtle sense of knowing from here, even without any craving, it creates a mild energetic friction. The knot rises, it meets the boundary of the knower, and it can't pass through to collapse. The whole system is just waiting for the vantage point to drop. You are watching the ultimate interface between the last conditioned patterns and the structure that produces the sense of I.
So how does this unfold?
It unfolds in 3 predictable phases. Phase 1 is intensification. This is the stage you're in now. The pressure increases in the forehead, the crown, behind the eyes, waves build, sometimes violently, but they don't collapse into vast space. Crucially, your equanimity is high, your emotional field is stable, and you have high clarity. You're not dull.
And this can last a while.
Days, weeks, sometimes months. And it's the most challenging part because the mind is screaming for resolution, but resolution requires structural surrender, not more effort.
So what resolves it? How do you break through that stasis into phase 2?
Phase 2 is the shift from witnessing to unlocated knowing. This is the moment the structure of asmi-māna begins to fail. It happens automatically when awareness becomes truly centerless, and the sense of a vantage point just dissolves. Imagine the viewfinder on a camera suddenly becoming transparent. The housing itself ceases to be a frame.
The location of knowing just dissolves.
It does. And the not stops being perceived as in front of awareness. Everything is just happening in one uniform, integrated field. The pressure starts to feel like it's in the same field as the knowing, rather than being observed by the knowing. The knowing is still functional, but it has no spatial residence. This shift is never forced. It happens when the equanimity is so deep and continuous that the mind releases its final cling, the cling to being the observer.
And what happens once that shift occurs? Once the observer collapses or loosens significantly?
That's phase 3, the pop, the release, the disappearance. Because the pressure knots were structurally held in place by the observer, when the observer collapses, the pressure melts instantly.
It's gone.
Instantly and dramatically. A sense of profound clarity, the head becomes luminous, a feeling of vast emptiness. Time perception drops, attention loses its center entirely. This is where the deepest structural saṅkhāras release in huge clusters, often followed immediately by a genuine cessation, a phala event, or a settling into this luminous, centerless equanimity that is the immediate precursor to cessation. The pressure was just waiting for the eye to get out of the way.
That structural explanation gives us so much clarity on the why of that crisis. So now let's address the how. What specific instructions can you give to someone who is stable in phase 1 pressure building, high equanimity, stable field, to accelerate the shift toward phase 2, toward that unlocated knowing? How do we nudge the system without introducing the very striving we're trying to get rid of?
Right. We accelerate the process by shifting the focus entirely, not on what is observed, but from where it is observed. But before we get to the technique, let's just confirm the system is primed. If these phenomena are present, the observer is about to dissolve.
Okay, the indicators.
Yes. There are 7 key indicators that the system is ready for dissolution, showing that asmi-māna is weakening. 1. The pressure stops feeling personal. It stops being my tension or my knot. It becomes just energy or a field event. It's not happening to you.
The me overlay just fades.
It fades dramatically. 2. Awareness widens on its own. You no longer have to deliberately open your awareness. It spontaneously sits wide like a 360-degree spherical presence that effortlessly includes everything.
Indicator 3.
The sense of being behind the experience things out. The physical vantage point of the observer, that sense of consciousness in the head, it flickers, it slips, becomes unstable like a mirage.
And 4, the one we talked about.
4. The pressure waves come, they peak, and they stay without breaking. That is the critical, classic pre-dissolution sign. The system is structurally ready, but it's waiting for that final cognitive shift before it can release.
Okay, number 5. This one's interesting.
Yeah, number 5. A subtle sadness, vulnerability, or a feeling of nothing interests me. This is vital to recognize. It is not pathological depression. This is the effective residue of the ego dissolving, the fading of attachment to being someone with a history and a future. A profound quietness settles in.
What about thoughts?
6. Thought becomes extremely faint or wide. Thoughts don't stick to a center. They feel like these transient, faint suggestions happening in a vast space.
And finally.
And 7. A sense of something big is about to shift. A pre-cessation intuition. An undeniable feeling that the system is at the precipice of a major, irreversible reconfiguration.
So those indicators are present. You're sitting right on the edge. Tell us what the shift itself feels like. The moment-by-moment experience as phase 2, unlocated knowing, actually begins.
It's like a quiet, perceptual earthquake. First, the vantage point becomes foggy or transparent. It's slippery like a mirage. When you try to look for the observer, you just find this placeholder sensation that's rapidly dissolving.
And awareness.
Awareness becomes both local here, but also spread out, centerless. The knowing function is active, but it has no physical center. It's functional, present, and expansive all at once.
And the relationship between sensation and awareness inverts.
Yes, this is the most critical part. Sensations appear inside awareness, not before awareness. You stop feeling, I am here, knowing that pressure. You start feeling knowing is taking place everywhere uniformly, and the pressure is just an event within that knowing. This is the death of separation.
And the pressure itself changes.
The pressure changes quality. It becomes less solid, less antagonistic, more like energetic weather, or just pure transient vibration in an open field. And this all culminates in a quiet click or a drop or a shift, often very small and subtle, as the observer finally collapses or becomes transparent, establishing that centerless, unlocated knowing.
Okay, Now for the acceleration technique. We have to avoid striving. The core instruction is not to change what you observe, but from where you observe. How do you actually implement this in a sit-ill when the pressure is intense?
This is the most subtle, but the most powerful instruction for the final approach. When the pressure builds, your habit is to observe the pressure. Instead, the instruction is to observe from where you are observing.
Not as a mental analysis.
No, not at all. As a gentle somatic curiosity. Where is awareness located right now? Is it fixed? Is it felt? You're turning the spotlight back onto the source of the light. You're treating the vantage point itself as the final sensation.
So the technique is to notice the observer as just another sensation.
Notice the observer as another sensation subtly felt in the head, behind the eyes, in the center of the skull. This exposure is key because the observer structure works by remaining invisible. It assumes it's the container of sensation, not part of sensation.
And once you can momentarily feel that location as a sensation,
then the instruction is to gently relax the sense of location, like loosening a grip you didn't even know you had. You allow the knowing position to soften and widen spherically. Don't try to spread it. Just release the tension that's defining its boundary. When that identification held by the observer dissolves, the pressure knots just melt at the root because they no longer have a viewer to face. This accelerates the shift dramatically from that static phase 1 to the dynamic phase 2.
That is extremely practical guidance. So let's assume the shift happens. The observer becomes optional, the knots integrate, the mind goes quiet, and it leads to a gap, followed by a reemergence with a wave of clarity and relief. How do you verify that this was a genuine cessation, a genuine phala, and not just a deep trance or spacing out or a microsleep?
This requires absolute sobriety. A lot of deep states can produce temporary gaps, but only a true phala produces the required lasting structural change that removes the remaining fetters. So we have to check the experience against the classical immutable signs.
Okay, what are they?
We rely on the 5 classical signs of a true cessation. Number 1, a discontinuity or a gap in experience. It has to be instantaneous, ungraspable, without content, without any eye or observing. It's a genuine, absolute cessation of mind and matter. Not a fade out into dullness, it's an abrupt halt, followed by an abrupt start.
Okay, number 2.
Number 2, a characteristic phase shift in the moment of reemergence. When awareness reappears, it spikes suddenly and cleanly. It feels like waking up into purity. There's an incredible clarity and spaciousness and brightness that was not there moments before.
What's the feeling afterwards?
That's number 3, a strong afterglow of relief, ease, and purity. This is not sensual rapture. It is profound stillness, coolness. Nibbana is often described as coolness and a deep sense of completion. That quiet, objective feeling that done is what had to be done. The deepest tension just drops away.
And number 4.
A noticeable reduction in agitation, craving, or subtle tension immediately after. Things feel lighter, the world feels less sticky, and crucially, there's less effort required, less identity tension, less sense of someone doing the knowing, and this reduction is instantaneous and it lasts.
And finally,
number 5, you cannot recreate it deliberately, but the mind feels inclined toward it. The mind knows the direction. You can't force the gap, but your sits become effortlessly calm, and the whole system spontaneously orients itself towards silence and unlocated awareness.
those signs address the event itself. But the most reliable confirmation has to be the aftermath, right? The permanent structural alteration.
Right.
How do we know the shift wasn't just temporary?
Yes, the structural change is the real proof. The most reliable signs which confirm that the mechanisms of suffering have been destroyed are the critical post-event confirmations. First, and most importantly, the sense of the observer has loosened significantly.
It feels weaker.
Weaker, thinner, less centered, more expansive, and crucially optional. When you sit, awareness is just naturally centerless. If the observer has become an occasional event rather than the default vantage point, that is profound confirmation of a structural change at the root of asmi-māna.
What about the knots?
Second, the knots in the head or the heart change quality. They lose their solidity, their old identity charge. They feel airy or hollow or transparent. They often just become energy within the field. They might still be there, but they no longer oppose a watcher because the structural resistance from the watcher is gone.
And the third confirmation.
The mind spontaneously enters calm. The mind doesn't feel the need for long, effortful sits. It just rests in natural equanimity without trying. That continuous, effortless awareness, the kaya viveka, is now the default mode, not an ambition.
I think we need to humanize this experience a bit. These deep structural shifts must have some challenging side effects as the nervous system recalibrates from decades of tension. What should you anticipate?
This is so important to normalize. Fatigue, tiredness. It's extremely common. The system is shifting from being driven by subtle adrenaline craving and striving to deep parasympathetic activation, rest and repair mode. The nervous system is releasing chronic, deep-seated tension, and the relaxation that results manifests as profound tiredness or lethargy. It's the body catching up with the mind's liberation.
Wow.
Other temporary effects can include waves of sadness or emotional vulnerability, or a sense of flatness, or just the lack of motivation. This is the effective residue of the ego dissolving as the mind rebalances and stops relying on the tension of attachment for motivation.
Right.
You might experience social disinterest or a mild disorientation as the brain starts to simulate the world with a new, centerless configuration. None of these are flaws. They are the unavoidable, temporary signs of the nervous system adapting to a non-striving, centerless mode of perception. You have to treat them with the same equanimity you'd treat a burning saṅkhāra.
So what does this all mean? If someone has experienced this clean structural shift, the observer is optional, the knots are integrated. They're in a very sensitive integration window. The mind is recalibrating to its new, centerless equilibrium. The next steps, then, must require a conscious discipline of non-interference to ensure it all stabilizes.
Absolutely. The principle is zero striving, zero pushing, zero analyzing. You want to let the structural shift stabilize organically. Let the system learn to function without its old center. Pushing now is the fastest way to reinstantiate the asmi-māna.
So what's the plan?
I recommend a clear 7-day integration plan that focuses on rest and grounding. Day 1 and 2, rest, spaciousness, zero pushing. This is rest and freedom. No formal sits longer than 10 or 20 minutes. And these short periods are just for resting in awareness, not practicing. If you feel tired, sleep. The body needs to catch up. Stay grounded. Feel your feet on the floor. Slow your breathing. Avoid mentally chasing the experience you just had.
And days 3 and 4.
Light contact with the world. Reestablish awareness during normal, gentle activities. That's applying kaya viveka. You allow emotions to arise as pure energy. We call this emotional transparency. And they just pass through like weather without interpretation or labeling. Do not analyze your experience. Let the new clarity define the world for you.
And the end of the week.
Day 5 and 6. Reestablishing natural clarity. Let any residual head knots unwind completely on their own. They're now fully inside the field and they'll dissolve naturally as the nervous system calms down. The instruction for a sit is simple. Rest in natural, effortless awareness. Insight unfolds now through non-doing. The mind should just be spontaneously open and expansive.
It sounds like the greatest danger during this period is intellectualizing the experience, trying to fit this vast new reality into old conceptual boxes.
That is the most crucial caution. The mind, being a conceptualizing machine, will try to reconceptualize the non-conceptual. So the cautions for this period are: avoid intense meditation sessions. Avoid deep philosophical analysis that just pulls the mind back into concepts and reintroduces the center. And absolutely avoid checking for enlightenment, which immediately reintroduces subtle craving and striving, thereby recreating the fetter of mana. Keep your lifestyle simple, grounded, and physical.
So we've mapped this journey from the most advanced stages of Anāgāmī purification all the way to Arahant Phala according to the Goenka lineage. It's a process defined by the complete dissolution of the witness, stabilized through continuous, effortless equanimity, and then verified by a clean cessation event, followed by these unmistakable structural changes in perception, where the observer becomes optional and awareness becomes centerless.
That's right. The structural shift means the fundamental mechanisms of suffering, the clinging to a fixed I, are no longer operating in their previous way. The mind is currently resting in natural freedom. It's unconstructed and pure. And so the key question now is not whether the self has collapsed, but whether the mind needs to expend any energy at all, even that subtle energetic friction of knowing from a location, to maintain that profound, unconstructed stillness against the pressures of external stress or conflict or bodily pain. That continued effortless stability, regardless of what the world demands, that is the irreversible knowledge that completes the path.